Howdy folks, Tex Grebner here with Tex Grebner Outdoors, new videos every Saturday. So if you don't want to miss out on your Tex Grebner Outdoors Saturday morning cartoon awesomeness, make sure to click subscribe. Check my channel every Saturday for new videos. I love reading your comments and I really do appreciate all of you that watch. I'm back in the woods, the second gun season's over with, but I've got to catch you up on what happened last week in Illinois Archery season 2016. And so you find yourself again at my cyber campfire. My goal is to carry on the ancient tradition of the hunting story and bring you with me upon my hunts. And for those of you who have never experienced or endured a frozen sunrise from a deer stand, it is one of the most austere and beautiful things that you can ever witness as the sun comes up over the horizon and sets the land on fire, melting the frozen fog into a chilly mist. Every day of hunting is exactly the same, but every day of hunting is just a little bit different. And once the phantasmagoria had been burned away, I remained as hopeful as I possibly could, with the grass still frozen beneath my stand, hopeful that the deer would be crossing between the cornfields up on the hillside and taking their deeply cut path just behind the pine trees in front of my stand. Everything, even down to the wind, was so perfect and remained so perfect as the guns boomed from the river, from the goose hunters, sitting, watching, waiting, listening, extremely excited and yet tempered with disappointment. Primal emotions were stirred in me as I witnessed the beauty of creation and the natural world as an active participant in the food chain, hunting as if there were nothing else, telling you a hunting story through my voice and through my camera is my goal. And if I come home empty-handed, I do not feel cheated as long as I have told you my hunting story. We're gonna go a little unconventional tonight. It was just above freezing for much of the day. The chores were done and the wind was right, and so I headed up to my tiny little chicory plot in the tiny little timber next to the tiny little pond, and I was sitting beneath my deer stand next to a pine tree in the fence row with a jar of code blue doe estrus in hopes of distracting a buck if he crossed the 1,000 yards to this plot. The shotgun season over the past weekend had sent much of the deer activity completely nocturnal, but I was happy to see that a decent buck had survived. And the amount of doe activity in the area told me that if there were still some in estrus, they might be visiting and being chased by a buck. So sitting, watching, waiting, and listening, feeling a bit of quiet desperation as the next firearm season edged closer and closer every minute, I did my best to remain hopeful. The deer activity seemed very concentrated as the temperature seemed to be dropping by the day. And so, as the last of the light began to fade, this hunt came to an end. It was an absolutely miserable day, but the chores were done, and so I headed to my stand. It had been raining literally all day, and the rain had slackened, but the gale force winds were still in effect. And provided that my stand tree did not rip from the soft, wet ground, I would remain. Every day of hunting is exactly the same, but every day of hunting is just a little bit different. Sitting, swaying, watching, waiting, listening. Those of us who have hunted tree stands much of our lives know what it is to be tree sick. There are certain types of hunting that require physical endurance, but deer hunting from a deer stand requires an incredible amount of endurance of the will, the ability to go out day after day and yet return home empty-handed with nothing to show for it but soaking wet clothing and perhaps a
smile. Even the squirrels were not to be found, and I watched the margins of the field, hoping against hope that I would at least be given a sign of a deer. And yet, normally, when the sun begins to fall, the winds slacken. This evening it was not the case. The chores were done yet again, and it was a new day. Completely opposite from the day before. Today it was 50 degrees and calm, as opposed to the 38 degrees and driving rain and gale force winds. Deer are wild and free, majestic, unpredictable creatures, and such is the joy of hunting them, and why I call the ancient sacrament of the hunt a visceral mystery, a full communion with nature. And yet, 4 does frolicked in the corn stubble far away from my stand. They ran back and forth, chasing one another. Hunting deer after the rut is difficult. Hunting deer after the first shotgun season is difficult. Solo hunting and filming and hunting with a recurve has its own compounded difficulties. But I was set up over the ragweed trail yet again. The wind was in my face, the temperature was dropping, and everything was perfect, and I was determined that I would sit until the last of the light, even though all my instincts were telling me that the season was winding down and that my curse would remain unbroken. My last hunt of the second archery season, nothing was going right. My camera on the remote was on the fritz. My camera on my bow was on the fritz. And nothing was going right. It was a cold day, intermittent between rain and sleet. I had cut the top out of a ground blind to give me limb clearance, and normally nothing going right is an excellent sign that I'm going to have a chance to screw up on a deer. My heart was filled with desperation and excitement. And just as an aside, for some reason, even though we never see people looking like they do on the magazine, man or female, whichever sex you're attracted to, for some reason, we always expect to see a Pope and Young buck on our trail cam or beneath our stand. As the sun continued to fade and the temperature continued to drop, my cameras continued to give me trouble, and my second archery season came to an end, yet again empty-handed.
As always, God bless all my sportsmen of America. Join the NRA to protect our rights. Please check out my friends over at SOETacticalGear.com. Thank you very much to those of you involved in law enforcement and those of you serving in the military. Thanks for watching Tex Grebner Outdoors.